It's a temptation in these polarizing times to want to end friendships with those with whom we disagree.
But it's more important now than ever that we try to cultivate those friendships.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
I'm James Weingardner, sitting in for Jerry Lutz for a COVID edition of the American Religious Town Hall meeting. And we have fewer panelists, and we're spread out to provide social distancing. We hope that you're healthy and well where you are. We have 4 panelists, and we'd like them to introduce themselves to us, and we'll begin with Bishop Olson.
My name is Bishop Michael Olson, and I serve as the Roman Catholic Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as Senior Rabbi at Temple Beth El in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, which is affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I'm a priest in the Episcopal Church, and I'm canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
We're going to discuss today an interesting question about friendships and disagreements. In an article entitled, "It's True, Ginsburg and Scalia Were Close Friends Despite Ideological Differences," the writer states that it's common knowledge in District of Columbia that late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia and his now late Ruth Bader Ginsburg were close personal friends. It's no secret that these two former justices had different legal opinions and walked, if you will, on different sides of the ideological lines that they would not cross. However, in spite of these differences, they were great friends. We live in a world that's so divided and polarized that many people find it odd to see two people who disagree on almost all issues, but they are still friends. Can liberals and conservatives actually be cordial to one another? Should Democrats hate Republicans, and should Republicans hate Democrats? The Scalia-Ginsburg relationship screams a resounding yes. The USA Today article states that they shared a love of opera, went souvenir shopping together when they traveled, and rode an elephant in India with Scalia up front. Their families spent New Year's Eve together, and when Chief Justice John Roberts announced the death of Ginsburg's husband, Marty, Scalia wept on the bench. This is the America that many of us love and long for again. An America that can disagree on issues but still be civil to one another. In light of this, we're asking our panelists to address the following questions. 1, how could two people with different political, social, and legal views be close friends? 2, what does the relationship once held between Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia teach us as citizens who are deeply divided? And 3, why is it difficult to take a stand on racial, political, and social issues and remain friends with those who disagree with your stand? What biblical principles can be added to this conversation? We have these questions before us, and now we're going to have some answers, and we will begin with Carl Trovall.
Sure. I think that one of the reasons that Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Justice Scalia could be close friends is that I think that they had what Aristotle called a friendship of virtue. Aristotle said that we have 3 different kinds of friendships. The first is pleasure, and that would be, we enjoy something together and we get mutual pleasure from being together, but it doesn't necessarily go that deep. And then there's friendships of utility, which is essentially those things where we need someone else to accomplish something in life. We become friends with them, maybe with someone, your store owner, or if or your customer, right? But the friendship of virtue for Aristotle was one that was like grounded in the respect for the character of the other person and who they were. And I think that this is why these two justices could overcome who they were, even despite the polarizing nature of and their opposing opinions with one another, is that they saw in each other something that went deeper than just simply the things they enjoyed together or the things that maybe they shared together in terms of utility or usefulness to each other. They saw, I think, each other as being very brilliant. I think they saw each other also as people who had deep convictions and operated out of those in logical ways, and who tried to raise the justice system of the United States. I think they saw those deep motives, and of course, because of that, they shared these things together like opera. That also, I think, was something that helps cement people together as well. And, I started out by saying the temptation is to end these friendships. And I don't know about you, but my own friendships have been challenged in these recent times. And it's a matter of really working hard to just stop and listen and to not make presuppositions about where other people are at. Because I think sometimes in friendships we think we know the other person, because we're friends after all. And then we find out, well, how can you believe that? You were my friend. And we have to step back and realize this other person's their own person.
Yeah.
So in the Talmud, there's two schools. There's the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai. And the Talmud relates that these two schools, led by these two great religious sages, had a dispute for years and years. And one would assert the law is according to the way we look at it. And the other said, no, the law is according to the way we look at it. And then eventually it says there was a bat kol, a divine voice that rang out from the heavens that said, in Hebrew, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These words and those words are the words of the living God. But the law goes according to Hillel. So why does the law go according to Hillel? Well, sometimes you got to make a decision. But really, they said the law goes according to Hillel because Hillel, whenever they would make an argument, would cite Shammai along with their own opinion. And they would cite Shammai first, before their opinion. They wouldn't say, well, we believe X. Now, Shammai thinks this. They said, no, Shammai thinks this, but we believe this. And it was because of their humility, because of their willingness to say that the other has value, that registered them as being the way that we should tack in terms of how we find our path in law. And I've always thought about that because even in the midst of this grand debate, the rabbis say that followers of Hillel would still marry their children off to those who followed Shammai and vice versa. That there was a sense that we can fundamentally disagree on very, very serious matters, but we're still one people. And I think that that's the model that Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg modeled for each other. They modeled a belief in dialogue over debate. And debate, I was taught, is like volleyball, right? You're trying to smash the ball at the other person so that they miss so you can score a point. And they said dialogue is like playing catch. Dialogue is where you're trying to give so that someone else can receive, and they're trying to give it back to you so that you don't let it drop. And I think that if we can take some idea of the fact that if I look at somebody who fundamentally disagrees, and instead of debating you, instead of saying, here's all the reasons you're wrong, here's all the reasons I'm not listening to you, here's all the reasons I won't have dinner with you or have a conversation with you, said, tell me more. And to pose from a place of humility and curiosity, we might find that we grow in our own humanity, our own understanding, far more than if we just sort of recommit ourselves to what we already think we know.
Thank you.
I think, in many of the obituaries on Justice Ginsburg, this friendship was brought up because in contemporary times it seems somewhat unique, sadly enough. But one of the stories that keeps coming up is their love of opera. And I don't think that's just an eclectic hobby. As I look at that, is in the sense of that each of them in a sense, found their friendship in transcendental values, transcendental goods, things that are immaterial, that can be appreciated for their own sake, and then coming to appreciate each other for their own sake, and their families for their own sake. So beauty in opera, the truth in the integrity of reasoning and in the law, and also the importance of the seriousness about which they took the law, that they could disagree and grow in a greater appreciation for the purpose and adjudication of the law. I know in the opening statement the term ideology was used, and I think that's unfortunate in this case because ideology is where the agenda leads and everybody else and everything else is measured by the agenda, as opposed to an agenda of what we think is right or good in serious matters, but come to an appreciation for it, even if our opinions don't become contrary to what we've held previously. They do change, because as long as we get a better understanding from that. I don't think they had a friendship of utility, and I don't even think they had a friendship of business. I think it's these transcendental goods of the law and of a life, each lived intensely and in really overcoming barriers like prejudice, like barriers like exclusion, that they were able to respect each other, which is key to friendship. Sometimes I think we think of friendship as just sort of an affection, and it's generally at the best based on utility or agreement, and those friends never last because they're not really friends. So I think even more so, I think the example of Justice Scalia, Justice Ginsburg, are important for us to value friendship that oftentimes I think is overlooked, and just as family is overlooked today.
Thank you. John?
Yes. At the time of her death, of course, none of us believed that she could possibly die before the election. There's certainly that type of expectation. And when she did die, the enormous grieving amongst all people because of the very important role that she'd played in the court so long, as well, and frequently in the dissenting position. She certainly was not on top of the pack, certainly not on top of the pack for most of the time that she was served in the court. She was frequently in the minority and dissenting position. And one of the things that came over the news about that is that when Ginsburg was writing a dissenting opinion, she frequently went to Scalia to have him read it before and to get his insights. And that, if nothing else, shows the deep respect that each have had for each other, that, the person who was going to be opposing her the very most on the court was her best friend, to whom she could bring her dissenting opinions to be able to even articulate those opinions more strongly because she had his insights into what she had written. And that speaks everything to me in relationship to the type of person that she was. How easy it is to dismiss some people today through verbal attacks. Think of just in our political scene that we have today, and how people are simply dismissed, literally taken off the map with because of that they might not believe the same thing that I believe in. And these two people stand as a real witness on how you can live together, even in diametrically opposed opinions. One of the things about Ginsburg is that she was a person of great empathy, tremendous empathy. She cared deeply for the nation, as well as for the people of this nation, and particularly those people for whom she fought so hard in her dissents. For most of the people that she was fighting for in her dissents did not get that freedom and justice that she was hoping for. But today, her dissents are being used as the way in which the nation is going on forward, in the issues of human rights and dignity. And so she is just really an idyllic type of person in relationship to what we should be and what we can be in this nation, inshallah, God willing. So she had a very common love for the sacredness of our democracy. And for me, that is a standard by which each one of us should deal with each other and how we relate to each other. Sure, we have differences, but that doesn't mean I have to hate.
Dan?
And I think that part of what they model for us is that I don't have to surrender my ideals in order to still recognize that someone can be a friend, that someone can still share a sense of a collective. Ruth Bader Ginsburg never backed down from a fight. Never. And Antonin Scalia never was bashful in expressing what he thought, even of what his dear friend Ruth would write from the other side of the bench. But there was a sense of something that was really quite profound between them. One was, I can fight for what I really believe in while still recognizing your validity as part of my collective. And what's amazing is how many laws came into being on the basis of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's dissents, and how she was still able to promote what she wanted, even from the minority. But there's a famous story that a clerk or an associate of Justice Scalia's was in his office, and it was a late afternoon, and there was a dozen flowers or roses that were on his side table. In his office, he said, "Oh, who are those for?" He said, "Oh, it's Ruth's birthday. I have to run down the hall and give them to her." And he said, "You disagree with her so vociferously. How do you have this friendship?" And he said, "There are certain things that are more important. There's just certain things that are more important. Our collective humanity is sometimes more important, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't go to the mat for the things that we believe in, because some of them are core to our humanity, but we can still love and appreciate the human being even in that which we disagree."
Thank you. Go ahead.
I think those are all excellent points. I think also it's very interesting. You made the distinctions or repeated Aristotle's distinctions of the types of friendship. And I think they also became friends in the sense of, because they were charged with the responsibilities of a Supreme Court justice, all right? And one of the things I think, in a sense, so they moved their friendship to of a higher good, of virtue, if you will, really is anchored on that, where I suspect that that previous friendships of utility or business went away when they got this extra authority. And I think also that's not uncommon. I think in my own life I've experienced that, becoming a bishop, and it's you say, "Oh, you've changed." I said, "Well, if you don't change, you're dead." But I mean, but you're also charged with other responsibilities, and some people are able to make that adjustment in friendship, and some can't. And I think that's just part of the human condition. The other thing is something that they've taught us too. I'd say, or we see exemplified in their friendship, is that all of your friends aren't going to be friends with each other. And I think there's an expectation today that you base your friendship on some sort of lockstep uniformity of opinion, which just is very contrary to human nature, and I think destructive of society.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Very good. We're going to go to a break and come back for our summations. Thank you, gentlemen.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. We're happy now to have our panelists summarize their positions, and we begin on my right with Bishop Michael.
The reflections that we've offered today regarding the friendship of Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg prompted me to consider something that St. Augustine wrote in the Catholic tradition on friendship. The first thing that you should observe is how the love involved in friendship ought to be gratuitous. I mean, the reason you have a friend or loved one ought not to be so that he can do something for you. If that's why you love him, so that he can get you some money or some temporal advantage, then you aren't really loving him. But the thing he gets for you. A friend, rather, is to be loved freely, for his own sake, not for the sake of something else. And if the rule of friendship urges you to love human beings freely for their own sake, how much more freely is God to be loved, who bids you love other people?
Thank you. Carl?
That's good. I think that for me, one moral that I take out of just seeing these two people in their deep friendship, and that is that the importance to overcoming our differences, and not in the sense of collapsing them and compromising, but of genuinely coming together and avoiding polarization and still maintaining the integrity of our own ideas, is that this has to be done on a local level. It has to be done on a personal level. It's not going to be done through the TV. It's not going to be done through Twitter. It's not going to be done through us writing papers on different things. It's about us coming into the same physical space as someone else and genuinely listening to one another. And I hope finding those people who are looking for that transcendent truth, goodness, and beauty, that you can both share that, even though you may have different opinions about how to put that into practice.
Ken and John?
I want to say that this has been an extremely important program simply because we're discussing something that is so much a part of our daily culture in this country today. And certainly Scalia and Ginsburg can teach us on how we can break down some of our barriers of hatred that separate so many people today. When you just look at the recent election, the small percentage between the two parties, it shows you the type of conflict that we have within this nation and how we're going to be able to break down so that we can truly walk as a nation in future times. It is easy to dismiss someone by verbal attacks. And I thought what you said, Carl, in relationship to Facebook is really right on target, because so much of the attacking is going on today through Facebook and creating the differences that we have. I personally have experienced this in our own church, in the issue discussions centering around sexuality. And when the Lambeth Conference met in a meeting of all the bishops in 1998, the tremendous divisiveness that brought to the bishops, that one bishop from one country would not speak to a bishop of another country simply because that person had been labeled because of the issues surrounding sexuality. And so we can be grateful for the tremendous empathy that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had in relationship to her relationship to Justice Scalia. And the question that they have both left for both of us is, how are we going to preserve our democracy in conflict? How are we going to preserve our democracy? How are we going to live together for the betterment of our nation and for the global community in which we live?
Thank you, John. Dan?
I think one of the most important questions that we can ever ask ourselves is it more important to be right or to be loving? And I think about how often it is that I see families torn apart. I see communities torn apart because people insist it's more important to be right, as opposed to asking whether I love that other person. And figuring out how to be loving, to me, is sometimes a far more difficult question to answer, and in fact, I think also far more essential. We need to learn how to figure out complicated questions that are for us to decide. There's a famous story in the Talmud that talks about a picayune argument about an oven and whether an oven is kosher. And Rabbi Yehuda says, I think it's this, and the rest of the sages say no. And Rabbi Yehuda says, if I'm right, let that tree prove it. And the tree uproots itself and moves 40 cubits this way, and they say, you can't bring a proof from a tree. And he says, well, if I'm right, then let that stream prove it. And the stream starts flowing backwards, and they say, you can't bring a proof from a stream. He says, if I'm right, let the walls of this Beit Midrash, this schoolhouse, prove it. And the walls start turning in, and the rest of the sages say, hey, stay out of it. And the walls just lean in to remember. And then he says, if I'm right, let God prove it. And God calls out, the law, don't you see, it's right. And what the sages say is, Lo bashamayim, quoting the book of Deuteronomy, it's not in heaven. It is up to human beings to figure out how to keep their collective, how to keep their composure, how to hold on with love to decisions that are not always so clear for us to discern, but it is up to us to discern.
Today's topic is clearly about what this show is about. And I'm so glad that we can be friends with people who aren't right all the time, because I was wrong in how I pronounced Antonin Scalia by pronouncing his name wrong. And during the break, these gentlemen reminded me of that, and we have corrected that, and now I won't pronounce it wrong ever again. But I'm glad that we can have friends even when we are wrong, or else I would have no friends, and neither would you. The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. The rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedoms, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.